So can we talk about this bike? I'm so excited for this one. Every other Can We Talk About It has been focused on an adventure bike. And today I want to talk about a bike that I'm super excited about. It's not new. This is not a new bike, but it's new-ish. It's new into the enduro world due to the efforts of Johnny Walker. So I want to talk about this bike. It's a motocross bike, and somehow Johnny Walker is an enduro rider for enduro cross and hard enduro and stuff like that. He has ridden for many teams, but I've always known him to be a beta rider. And recently, he got a new contract, new team, and he's riding for Triumph, which Triumph for my entire life has been a road bike brand, a cool one. Like they make cool like bikes, but they've never made dirt bikes. So when Triumph decided to make a new dirt bike, everyone was kind of skeptical. But then they realized who they had on board. They had Ricky Carmichael helping develop this bike. So yeah, it was destined to be good. Today I want to talk about one of these two models in particular. There's a 450 and a 250. These are made for the to race in those classes, obviously. I believe they dropped the 250 first and the 450 came second. And yeah, RC Edition 450, Ricky Carmichael. The one I want to talk about though is the 250 because that is the one that Johnny Walker is using in Enduro Cross. Not Enduro Cross, I'm sorry. I keep saying Enduro Cross. What I mean to say is Super Enduro. It's the European Enduro Cross. And in my opinion, it's like the top tier of Enduro Cross. So it's an indoor enduro based, kind of like the way supercross is to motocross. It's short, it's in an arena, so you can have a crowd. Lots of people show up. They put in really tough obstacles. Sometimes there's big jumps, sometimes it's just really techy. You never really know what to expect with super enduro from one track to the next, and I love it. If you don't know, motocross and enduro require completely different motorcycles. They seem like they're the same thing, and a lot of people would be like, "Well, you can do both." Yeah, you can do both on both bikes, but the biggest differences are going to be general plushiness. For a motocross bike, you want like hardcore bottom out resistance, no matter what. There's a lot of plushness that comes with speed and hitting obstacles at speed. That in enduro you want more plushness, being able to rebound and then use that rebound to get the front wheel up and float the front wheel a lot at lower speeds. So the suspensions are very different and the engines are designed to be very different. So that's a big difference that Johnny has had to do, and I'm going to assume that when he gets into hard enduro, when they have those long days, the summertime, he's going to need a bigger fuel tank. Right now, they're probably running the smaller fuel tank, which motocross, and when you race motocross, you only ride for like 20 minutes max, and then you go back to the pits. So you don't need a big fuel tank. But yeah, so they use a smaller fuel tank. But this bike looks sick. Like, I absolutely love the way this bike looks. It does have a couple key differences between what Johnny Walker just came off of, which would have been the Beta 300. Well, the main difference is it's four-stroke. It's a four-stroke and it's a smaller engine. So that's a big difference. Another really big difference is actually the frame. He came off of a steel frame. I haven't had enough experience on aluminum frames to be like, oh yeah, big difference. But it is a difference. So he's coming off of that. But what's weird is the KYB suspension is actually the same across. So he's probably familiar with the components inside the suspension, not the motocross. I will say that the number one things that I love about this bike and watching Johnny Walker race this bike is that when it hits the ground, it is like planted. He can be on the gas, and typically an enduro bike, it like bounces up a little bit, like I said, so you can use that rebound to get the front tire back up. But the rear of this bike sits and just stays and is just like ready. It's like, okay, let's go. It's really, really, really planted, which is completely, I don't know. I don't see it. Usually you see that rear rebound a little bit. And I think that he was able to use that. A lot of that's going to come down to the geometry here on this swing arm, and then like the linkage, and there's a lot of development that went into this suspension to make it unique and good. Ricky Carmichael, in no small part, played a huge role in that. He's an older guy now, but he still rips. So him going out there and working with Triumph to make this bike like a good, solid contender, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Ricky Carmichael is the number one most winning person on a motorcycle in history. So the guy knows his stuff just through trial and error, because he came from not like he didn't come from a tuning family. They figured it out as they went. So there's a lot to talk about on this bike, and I'm gonna skip over a lot because I'm not a motocross guy, and this is a motocross bike. So I'm talking about it from again from my perspective, like I did with every other bike. So yeah. This is a lot of just gonna be your standard marketing, and it's like I could read it, but the truth is like it's just it all reads the same. I'm looking at the pictures for differences, and I'm looking at the specs for things that make this bike different and that make it interesting. I do like the Brembo brakes. Brembo's good. It's solid. KTM, the umbrella, uses a bunch of different ones, but KTM, the Brembo brakes are considered to be the top tier. In fact, Husqvarna and Gas, I believe, they just had to have a big recall because the brakes that they were using were not working the way that they said that they were, but the Brembo ones were completely fine. So, yeah, podium ready. Like, it's so crazy to me that they're not using this to say, like, Johnny Walker won an Enduro, SuperEnduro on this. Okay, here's what I'm actually interested in. Specs. The price, I don't know much about motocross bikes. I feel like this is a good price because enduro bikes are expensive. Like, because a lot of times they have to be road compliant. So they are very expensive just because of that. But maybe motocross bikes are cheaper. I know like the YZ is pretty cheap, but yeah, pretty cheap. They're still very expensive. This is an expensive motorcycle. It would be over $10,000. But still, comparing it to other new motorcycles, which, yeah, this is where I'm excited. This to me is like the thing that makes this bike different. The fact that it's a 4-stroke, the fact that Johnny Walker is committed to using a 254 stroke throughout the hard enduro season this summer. I'm really excited to see what's going to play out there. And a lot of people, and myself included, kind of are critical of that because it's really a lot harder to stall on a 2-stroke, and you could just lug it a lot lower because you get that the engine is getting power twice as often to maintain itself. So it's just like super luggable because that 2-stroke is just going to pull you along. So when I rode my buddy's 500, what's up, BK? It has a huge stroke, meaning the piston is moving a lot, and it's a 4-stroke. So the piston has to move a really long distance between booms. So it is super easy to stall a 500cc 4-stroke. So this is a 250. It's half that. Is it the piston is smaller or is it the stroke is smaller? Those both affect the CCs. And I'm looking at the bore of this, which is the piston width. It is big. 78 millimeters is bigger than my 300cc 2-stroke. My 300 has a 72 mil and a 72 mil stroke. So it's a smaller piston, but a really small stroke, which means that this bike is going to rev to the freaking moon. And that is a good thing. Who doesn't love Carson Brown, like revving it out? But that short stroke is going to allow less distance for the piston to travel between input for booms, between booms. So more boom, more often, make more good. You can lug it a little bit lower, and I'm sure that the clutch is phenomenal. And if it's not, I guarantee Johnny is going to have that thing on point. You cannot ride Supercross, you cannot ride Super Enduro or hard enduro without a just magnifique clutch. It has to be able to take abuse all day because you're riding the clutch all day. So I think Johnny's going to have to make some adjustments to his hard enduro riding style. He's definitely going to have to use more RPM than he's used to, which is going to mean that the bike's going to run hotter. So 100% this bike's going to have a fan, maybe even more, which might mean that they need to up the stator and the power generation of it to include a fan. So because it's a 4-stroke, going to have the RPMs up more. So he's going to have more RPM, more clutch control. So we are going to be building heat in the combustion chamber, and we're going to be building heat down in the wet plate Belleville spring clutch. I like to see a Belleville spring clutch. That means I think that means that it's like the DTS in KTM. If it's not, I'll correct myself or I'll leave it in, and you guys can laugh at me. Who knows? But what I'm trying to say is that because it's a four-stroke, because it's a small capacity four-stroke too, a 250 instead of a 450, which Jesus, I can't even imagine trying to ride hard enduro on a 450. But he's gonna have to rev it up more, use the clutch more. It's gonna be a lot of heat, so they're probably gonna be changing out the power generator and putting a fan kit on that bike and just pumping air through it, through those radiators. It might run a thicker radiator if they can. I definitely, anything you can do in hard enduro to keep the bike cool is beneficial. A lot of this just kind of going on and on. Final drive. They talk about final drive and specs. It's completely irrelevant. That's something you change per race. So this is your gear ratio, front sprocket to rear sprocket. I'm assuming Johnny's probably working with 52 in the rear. The front sprocket, it depends. It all depends on the race. It depends on the course. The stroke though being short and the bore being big, like I was talking about, big RPMs, that's good. Compression 14.4 to 1, that's race gas, or not race gas, that's high octane fuel for sure. So again, this is a motocross bike, so they don't have to deal with the things like the adventure bikes have to have lower compression ratios because they have to be able to use fuel from all over the place. This bike is, look, I'm a race bike, deal with it. This is something I know a lot more about, even if it really upsets people that I'm talking about adventure bikes from a hard enduro perspective. That's what I know, so I'm going to talk about it from there. Front wheel is 21. That's normal. Rear 19. I would bet. I'm not a betting man, but I assume, how's that? I assume that Johnny has an 18-inch on the rear. That's pretty much what the standard enduro tire is an 18. A 19 is definitely a motocross thing. I would like to know why. I have an idea. I understand geometry and how big your tire equal make things seem smaller. So if you have like an actual scientific reason, let me know. I'm more interested in that than you think. I'm definitely not interested in you're stupid, bro. Like don't be a jerk. Just explain to me. I'm curious. I like learning. The suspension is a fully coil spring suspension. The forks are coils. I don't believe that they're air forks at all. I think that Ricky Carmichael being part of that had a big part in them saying we're not going to use air forks. A lot of the top riders don't like air forks. And the tuners like them because they can work with them. But the riders, if you're doing your own tuning and stuff, air forks are tougher. You have to understand just another thing about suspension components. They are better technically because that extra pressure from the air being input or the nitrogen decreases cavitation, so it makes your suspension last. It makes your suspension more consistent for longer. So that's why they do it. But a lot of guys say, look, it's a motocross bike. We're only going to be out there for 20 minutes. Cavitation is just becoming a problem right around the 15-minute mark. If we can just make the valves better, we won't have to deal with cavitation so much. So they probably said, KYB, let's make these valves good. Let's make these valves with less area for cavitation to happen, so vacuum. And they fixed a lot of the cavitation issues without having to use high pressure. That's my guess. You can make a spring fork really, really good a lot easier than you can an air fork. Air forks, a lot of people are switching them out, honestly. So, yeah. It does have a display, which is really unique. Hour meter, multifunction switch cubes. Well, I don't know what that means, but dimensions and weight. Handlebar width. I think honestly this is going to be pretty standard stuff. Height without mirrors. Oh, they sell it with mirror. Oh, I didn't know that. Seat height. That's tall. That's really tall actually. My bike is 910 millimeters. This one's 970, so that's a pretty tall boy. I think that might be a motocross thing because you shouldn't be sitting anyways. Like seat height, enduro, motocross, hare scramble, seat height really should be irrelevant. It should only be when you're sitting on the exit of a corner that you sit, and then you should be back up right away. So race bike, seat height, not important. Adventure bike, very important. Trail rake. This stuff's all super important, but not to me. 7-liter fuel tank is tiny. Sorry, 1.8 gallon for you. And wet weight. I like that they say wet weight and they don't say dry weight, because dry weight could mean no gas, or it could mean no gas, no coolant, no oil. And that's a big difference. Wet weight means we filled this thing up. This is what it's going to be like when you get on it. So 220 pounds is pretty dang good. Aluminum frame, that's really good. And then warranty. Is it even worth mentioning a warranty if it's like 30 days and like if it breaks within 30 days, bring it back? Like, I should hope. Um, I think that the reason I'm so excited about this bike isn't because of Triumph coming out with a motocross bike. I think it's for me because I'm an enduro fan and I like super enduro and hard enduro. It's the fact that Triumph said we're going to put Johnny Walker on this bike and we're going to build a team around it. It's kind of what Yamaha is having happen in America with Cody Webb, but with the YZ and Cody Webb, but on a Triumph in a much newer platform. So it's a more involved development because the YZ has a lot of aftermarket support while this bike does not. So it's more of an investment for Triumph to say, okay, we're going to work with Johnny and we're going to make an enduro team happen. And I like that they're willing to do that. And the fact that he went out and won a moto against Billy Bolt is just perfect. I love it. I love Billy Bolt. He's like one of my favorite riders, but I like Johnny too. And Johnny took on Billy, got a win on Billy Bolt, who does not lose very often. And he did it on a 254 stroke. I mean, that's sick. I don't care about 4 or 2 stroke. I personally like 2 stroke. I like the way they sound. I like the way they ride. But I'm not like a huge fanboy. And if you ride a 4 stroke, I'm not going to be against you. I just think that for what I do, I like 2 strokes. But that doesn't mean that when I see this bike out there ripping a super enduro and it's a 250 and Johnny Walker makes it look so effortless that I'm not excited. You know, I like seeing new stuff. This bike is new. This bike is different. Obviously, in my world, there's things that need to be changed. We talked about the fan and the need for more electrical generation than most motocross bikes have. Softening up the suspension is going to have to happen, sadly, and then a bigger fuel tank. And I'm trying to think, and a different rear tire size. Honestly, though, that's not a lot. Oh, and maybe if you could tune the engine to have like a slightly more like less of an aggressive curve, which I believe they've done for Johnny Walker. The announcers talked about him having a new engine. This would be it. That would be a big deal for him. Obviously, protection, skid plate. You're going to need to have lever protection, hand protection. You're going to need to have disc brake protection. All that stuff, kind of like a no-brainer. So, yeah, I think this bike's really good. I think I'm excited to see what they do with it, and I really do hope that Triumph comes out with an enduro version, and just like Stark did with Tadej Blazusiak, they said we're going to hire this guy so he can help us develop it. I think that might be what's happening with Johnny Walker and Triumph. So let me know what you guys think about this. Obviously, if you're a motocross guy, this bike is exciting for you, and if it's not, how? But if you're an enduro guy, it should be exciting too, because we got Johnny out there winning super enduro, and hopefully he can do something with it in the summer for hard enduro. I'm excited to see him at Erzberg, at Romaniacs, and doing that kind of stuff. Yeah, so should be really cool. Sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think. Yeah, thanks for watching.